Okay, lesson 11. We're going to make an important transition today. We've had introduction in the first 10 lessons. We've laid the foundation with yama niyama, but we're going to make a transition towards energy. Lesson 19, we will introduce pranayama, which is energy control. To be able to do that, you have to have a sense of what energy is. Not theoretically, but in a practical sense. The subject now is asana. After the break, the subject will be prana. And then from next week, we will start with kriya exercises that will prepare you for pranayama. So, asana, lesson 11, asana. Most of what we discussed you've already heard. I probably repeated it several times already. But asana is asana. In contrast with how it is approached these days, I always make a distinction between modern yoga and traditional yoga, because they are actually totally the opposite of each other. Somebody asked me, have you tried Ashtanga yoga? I have, and I didn't like it. Why? Because I know how traditional yoga feels, and then you try something else, and it feels the opposite. Instead of becoming peaceful and calm, it aggravates, it makes restless. It's a good exercise, don't get me wrong. It's a good exercise. Any exercise is good. But asana is asana. It's just in its own league, so to speak. The word in itself is done an injustice in most yoga classes because it means standing still. And in most classes there is no standing still in asana. So it shouldn't even be called asana. Asana literally means standing still posture. And the reason why standing still is important as opposed to movement, movement is good for health, don't get me wrong, I will emphasize this many times, but standing still is where the magic of yoga begins. Standing still directly leads to the union or the fusion of the physical and the mental body. And I made a joke about this before, how many modern yoga teachers walk around the class putting you in a very strenuous pose, and they are walking around with their hands behind their back, and in a very mysterious voice they say, connect your body with your mind and your soul. And you are standing there shaking and sweating or moving through the asanas without any break. It sounds very mysterious, but they accomplish the opposite. They keep you imprisoned down in the physical body by the way that they let you do your exercise. If you do asana correctly, you don't even notice. Yes, you do notice. If you are sensitive, you feel the difference. It just feels right, it feels good. It's in my case, it's what made me become addicted to yoga. Why I fell in love with yoga. Because it felt so good. Ever since then, exercise is exercise, yoga is yoga. There is no crossing the lines there. That may sound a little bit radical, but the reason why I'm so strict about it is because yoga has so much to offer, but only if it's done correctly. So asana means standing still. Now the Hatha Yoga Pradipika in chapter 1 has a whole section about asana, and some of the things are integrated into this handout. One important thing, already the question came up about inverted poses. There is I can't call it a rumor, let's call it a dogma. There is this dogmatic there's this dogmatic approach to inverted poses where it comes to women having their monthly period. And many teachers, instructors will tell you, if you have your period, don't do inverted poses. Shoulder stand, headstand, etc. The problem starts when you ask why. Because often the answer is, when you are upside down during your monthly period, poisoned blood flows back into your body. Doctors will tell you, anatomically, this is impossible. It's impossible. So, but this is a very stubborn issue. There must be some truth behind it. And our approach is, first of all, everybody experiences their monthly period differently. There are women who barely feel impacted by it, barely suffer from it. They just go on with daily life as normal. But the other side of the coin is there are women who are very strongly impacted by their monthly period, to the point that for a day or two, when it is at the peak, they barely function. So this is the thing. Follow your feeling. Actually, somebody else said, you know what? When I have my period and I do a shoulder stand or an inverted pose, I actually feel better afterwards. And this is the key point. Follow your feeling. The menstruation has to be respected because it is a very important process that takes up or can take up a lot of energy. Because of that, we have to approach it. I say we, I'm not even a woman. I've never had a monthly period. But it's very important that you follow your feeling. Do not avoid the shoulder stand. Try it out, and if it doesn't feel good, feel free not to do it. But this does not apply only to inverted poses. This applies to anything, any exercise, anything in life. Take your time. When you have your monthly period and it comes heavy to you, take your time, take it easy on yourself. If there is an exercise, try it out. If it doesn't feel good, you have to listen to that. You have to respect that. Then skip it for the time being. Does that answer the question? It's a dogma. And you will see, we will come across a couple of other dogmas. Yoga teachers tell you not to take a shower after your yoga practice. They have a shower room, by the way. But there are teachers who tell you not to take a shower after your yoga practice. If you ask why, yes, ask why when your yoga teacher tells you that. Some teachers will tell you, because the spirit will leave your body. Worse is if they say, well, that's what my teacher taught me. But again, like with inverted poses during your monthly period, there must be some truth to it, finding its roots in an ancient past. First of all, if you practice yoga correctly, you notice after the class, you feel very nice. Your energy household has leveled out, and that translates as a sense of well-being. What happens if immediately after your yoga practice you sit down and have a meal, or you jump in the shower and you take a shower, is you very rudely disturb that sattva that you have built with your yoga practice. So it's a very practical issue. Again, follow your feeling. You have an Ashtanga class. When I came in, the floor was hot. You sweat a lot. Sure, take take a shower. There is no sattva anyway in the Ashtanga or the hot yoga class. But when you practice yoga correctly, well, try it out maybe. Take a shower and see how it affects you. But actually better to preserve your sattva, to allow the energy to settle down, just wait a little bit. That actually applies to everything. If you make an appointment exactly at 6 o'clock, and we finish the class at 6:05, you become restless because, oh my God, somebody's waiting for me, now I have to rush. So you roll up your mat and you're like, bye, and you run out the studio, you crash. All your work is for nothing. If you want to make an appointment, make it 7, so that you have plenty of time to go quietly on your way, non-violent. Water also the second chakra from the bottom is the water center. There's a location of lots of emotions. Your body consists for more than 60% out of water. Without noticing, there is a huge influence on your water center. If you look at the ocean, the difference between high tide and low tide can be more than 5 meters. A huge mass of water on this earth is being pulled and being released again. By what? By the force of gravity of the moon. In 1953, in the southern part of Holland, we had a huge flooding, big disaster, thousands of people died. When the moon was full, in combination with a southwestern storm in the North Sea. The water was so high that it breached the dikes, and ever since then they have been building flood control. And because of that experience, the Dutch are famous for their flood control. They're building flood control everywhere in the world. Huge projects. That's the power of the moon, that has an influence on a human being without you consciously noticing it. But look at the word that we use for crazy people. Lunatic. Lunatic is a Latin word. Luna is the month, the moon. Luna. Tic is a hit. It is an extreme emotional condition that occurs during or around the full moon. You are hit by the moon, literally. Lunatic. Statistics show that most suicides occur during the full moon. So water, the element of water, needs to be respected. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika says, stay away one arrow shot length away from water. But not only water, also air, water, earth, water, and fire. Stay away one arrow length away from earth, one arrow length away from water, and one arrow length away from fire. Now, interestingly, earth, water, and fire are the elements of the lower 3 chakras. Those are the 3 chakras where all the lower emotions and desires are located. We'll talk about it again when we study the Hatha Yoga Pradipika chapter 1, after the introduction of pranayama. Staying away from earth, water, and fire, you can take that literally as I was taught to take it literally, stay away 1 arrow shot length from Earth. My teacher explained as your room has to be big enough. If the ceiling is low and the walls are very close, you feel oppressed. It oppresses your energy. Stay away from water, as I explained just before. It has a huge impact. So if you practice on the beach, for example, stay away, far away, at least 50 meters away from the shoreline. And fire, you know, in Korea they have this floor heating, and it's very comfortable, but it destroys your own energy household. So we will come back to that in detail more later on. We discuss the fire center, of course, very important. But staying away from earth, water, and fire is a symbolical way to tell you to stay away from distractions. Distractions that you find in daily life, in society, that cause scattering of energy, that cause ups and downs in your moods and emotions, restlessness. It is the very reason why, according to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, not only in India but all over the world, spiritual centers are built far away from society. Somewhere far away in the mountains, or in the woods, or just somewhere in an abandoned place. Why? To eliminate any possible distraction. That is what it really means. Stay away from earth, water, and fire. Create a condition in which you can focus on the higher goal. Energy that's scattered tends to gravitate towards the bottom. While when you create monastery, temple-like conditions, energy naturally tends to rise up. We will discuss that after the break when we talk about prana. Tenzin?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just one thing, you mentioned 3 of the 5 elements. Does air and space also have centers in the body?
Air and ether. Heart chakra is air and the throat is ether.
Right.
We'll come to that. Lesson 13 to 19 we discussed the chakras, including the elements and so on. So everything in yoga is about energy, and as a beginner in yoga, you might not be so much aware of it yet, but you will more and more start to notice, you will become more and more conscious and sensitive towards how energy is managing you. You start to notice that when you eat your favorite food, it can bring you to heaven. But it's so delicious, you can't control yourself, and you take a second serving and even a third serving. And while first, because it's your favorite food, it's so delicious, so exquisite, it first brought you literally to heaven, you crash. Literally. You need a nap, you drink a coffee or two, and even, especially as yogis, you will notice that even it extends into the next day, that it destroys your mood. When you become more and more conscious of that, naturally you want to avoid that. Because who doesn't want to feel good? And yoga makes you feel good, but there are many things that can destroy that. So we finished last week the niyamas with self-study, and eventually the last one, surrender. Self-study is this, that you observe what happens, draw conclusions from it, and based on that, you make adjustments. Which is tapas. Making adjustments means controlling, which is the practice of austerity. before asana practice, I think everybody understands, if this applies to all physical activity, I think it's best not to eat. Even more so with asana, of course, because there are many exercises where you twist or you bend, and your stomach is being oppressed and twisted in all kinds of forms and shapes. And if you do that after a meal, it can be even painful in your stomach area when you do asana. So, same story. If it doesn't feel good, just avoid it. It's best to practice therefore in the morning, after waking up, but before having a meal. So if you have the discipline and you're not too busy, if you work for 14-hour days, of course, it's a little bit difficult to find time, leave alone in the morning when you wake up. But if you have the discipline to wake up a little bit earlier than usual, try to fit in some asana practice in the morning. A morning is excellent for asana practice because asana generates Shakti energy, which is the energy that wakes you up in the morning. So if you have difficulty waking up in the morning, many people, for example, suffer from Monday morning blues, or Monday morning disease, we call it in Holland. It's simply a matter of energy. Because the weekend is kind of disturbing your routine, and you haven't had enough rest to resettle or to reset your energy household, and Monday morning the alarm clock rudely disturbs your resting process, telling you, hey, it's time. The clock forces you to work while your body actually wants more of that rest it was getting on Sunday. If you have the discipline and you do some asana, that whole Monday morning blues is gone. It's just amazing. And if you experience that once, the next time it will be much easier to do because you look forward to it.
Normally, what time in the morning is the best time to exercise yoga?
That is very different for everybody.
But some yogi says that like around 3:30 is the best time to start.
You can push it very far, but most people don't have the luxury to get up at 3:30 in the morning and practice yoga because you have a schedule to keep. But if you go to a temple or a monastery and you can exclusively focus on yoga practice, you can do yoga at 1:30 at night, in the middle of the night.
No, the yogis have that like at that moment, I don't know exactly what's going on, but they're saying that like because of the position of like earth and sun, there's
I know. There are studies that go very deep into the biological rhythm and the energy cycle and what have you. For me, that's just a headache. Follow your feeling and be practical also. If you have a full-time job in the daytime, you're not going to wake up at 3:30 in the night because some monk said that is the most ideal time to do so. You can try it out when you have a vacation maybe, but it will actually disrupt your daily routine. But there's some truth to it, but most people, it's so subtle, that influence is so subtle, most people won't notice. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to give an additional point for
Yep.
the 3:30 thing is in Eastern medicine too. They say that that's the time when the lung meridian starts being active. So then the air becomes active in the cosmos, and so we breathe in the air and then it travels to the rest of the energy bodies. So that may be one of their reasons for mentioning that time to you. But as Ron said, following or feeling is a good way to go.
Yeah, for me, going so deep into the universe and astrology and what have you, for me it doesn't work.
3:30 a.m. for meditation has more meaning according to spiritual meaning according to Buddhism. You can search for it. 3:30 a.m. Normally monks get up at that time and have meditation, but they have a spiritual meaning for killing the something like desire inside a monk's body at that time. There's so many myths. We don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about discipline. You will see somewhere in the handout that rigid discipline doesn't work. But discipline is supposed to be good. It's as follows. I have to refer again to this poor girl, Yubin, who was forced by her dad to come to my yoga class. That is discipline. But it is forced discipline, it's rigid discipline. I've tried it all in yoga and in Hapkido, but try to picture this. You discover yoga and wow, it feels so good. So you become enthusiastic and you say, I'm going to practice yoga every morning 6 o'clock before getting ready for work or school. You jump out of bed, you take a cold shower, you jump on your yoga mat and you practice. You do that every day. Discipline. You know what happens? After 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the word yoga alone makes you sick. You start to hate what is supposed to be good for you. So rigid discipline doesn't work. Discipline has to be something that comes naturally. An internal motivation because something feels good. But discipline, also the one that comes naturally, does not imply that you must do it every day as you envisioned it. There must be room to say, today I don't feel well. I'm a bit lazy, let's skip today. If you allow yourself the room to do so, you will naturally want to practice again tomorrow. You know how it works? You practice regularly, almost every day. There comes a day that you are in your bed and you want to turn around again, pull the blankets over your head, just wanting to be lazy. That can happen. But now, an hour later, you wake up and you look at the clock and you say, oh gosh, now I have no time anymore. So you go about the rest of your day and you notice it just doesn't feel the same as usual. Because usually you start your day with yoga practice or you go to sleep with yoga practice and it just changes your day or your night. So this is what happens. You allow yourself to be lazy and simply the conclusion that it feels different will make you will almost make a holy vow to practice next day again. So the motivation is only reinforced there in a natural way. Especially because you allowed yourself to be lazy one day. You force yourself in spite of your laziness to practice, you start to hate it. You give yourself room and you only love it more because you miss it. Missing it is your natural motivation to do it again tomorrow. So be flexible. Yoga is, after all, about flexibility. More mentally than physically. Although the impression exists otherwise. These days it's all about super flexibility physically, but it's really about not being rigid in thinking. that is actually more important than the physical flexibility. Good. Practicing in nature is very positive for yoga practice, and the reason for that is we live in concrete and steel structures. Concrete and steel is not sattvic. If you live in it every day, you don't notice. But if you've lived all your life in concrete steel structures, and one day you go, I went to the mountains and lived in a wooden hut for a week. It was just amazing. The contrast between living in Seoul in a steel concrete apartment with the week in that wooden hut, it made me have a wish to one day build a house out of wood. Going back to the apartment was like a slap in the face, but very soon you go back to your old pattern and you don't even notice anymore. What I'm trying to say is nature, wood therefore, is very sattvic, and even if you don't practice yoga, it influences you in a positive way, creating harmony. So practicing nature in the park, in the forest, in the mountains, or on the beach is a good location to do so. It's conducive to your, it supports what you're trying to do, creating harmony with your practice. The Hatha Yoga Pratipika addresses the issue of company that disturbs. If you live with other people in a house, it's best to arrange a time to practice yoga when there's nobody else around. If that's not possible, then try to separate yourself into a room where you can be on your own during the time that you practice. The presence of other people who think you're being a little bit funny these days because you started practicing yoga is very disruptive. I was practicing yoga every day when I was in my early 20s, and then I got a girlfriend, and she tended to show up just any time of the day whenever she had time, and ring my bell and come up the stairs. And I was just about to meditate, so I was already used to her just dropping in anytime she liked, so I told her, just sit down, here you have a magazine, and just give me 15 minutes, I will be done. But it was a one-room studio. So I sat there, my face facing the window, and she was sitting behind me on the sofa. And after a couple of minutes, it went like... And I tried to... Oh. At a certain point, I said, what's happening? She said, what the hell are you doing sitting there doing nothing? That was the last time that I practiced with anybody in my presence. It doesn't work. It's a funny anecdote, but everything is about energy. You are energy, another person's presence is energy. As a yogi, you will become acutely aware of how disrupting another person's presence can be. And it will become more and more so. That's why I think it is very natural that you have a tendency to find more and more I time. I think I'm almost like a recluse, almost like a hermit. I am actually a hermit. In a city with 12 million people, I'm living almost like a hermit. It's natural. You want to avoid any kind of distraction, any kind of disturbance when it is not necessary. You have obligations, social obligations, if you work, study, have a family, but for the rest, whenever you can, you just want to withdraw yourself. That's it.
I was just wondering, there's a lot of meditation teachers, they recommend like meditating in public places, on the bus, like doing walking meditation while you're waiting for the subway. And when I was on the meditation retreat, the meditation leader got a complaint and said, could you please tell the people have the beacon watches to switch them off? And the meditation leader was like, you should really just learn to be able to, just like deal with it, basically.
Yeah, there is some truth to that. But meditation and trying to keep your own are two different things. So you can be in a bus or walking in the street. Walking meditation is actually a contradiction in itself. Because meditation means turning your attention inwards. But that doesn't mean that it can't be meditative. And it is kind of a practice of austerity to be in a subway or a bus, or to walk around in Myeongdong or Itaewon where it's very busy, and to stick to your own, to try to not be disturbed and distracted. And that's an interesting experiment to do. You can approach, I think you will naturally approach life in such a playful way. Because we don't have the luxury to buy a hut somewhere far away in the mountains and isolate ourselves, which I think most of you naturally will want to do at some point. Keep it playful, but at the same time, when you practice on your own, just try to create the circumstances that are most conducive, that are most supporting what you're trying to do, and that is in silence. So in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, we'll go a little bit deeper into that, because the Hatha Yoga Pradipika gives a very clear description of the place that you have to create for yourself to best benefit from your yoga practice. You see the 6 qualifications also that make yoga work. They are directly from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. On page 2, steadfastness, effort and dedication, courage, true knowledge, belief, faith and confidence, and detachment from people's company. Steadfastness is a matter of purity, consistency. You decide to do something, then do it. Do it without allowing yourself to be distracted. In the beginning, that can be a struggle. I struggled with it many times not to be distracted. It's just a process. You're with one foot in your old life and with one foot in your new spiritual life. And there is just a conflict going on that will take some time to solve. That's okay. Keep it playful. But steadfastness, come back to what you have chosen to do. Before the class started, we talked about not practicing for a while. It can happen. I didn't practice for 2 months. Then my back started to hurt and my belly started to grow. So you naturally come back to your practice again. It usually happens when there is an important change taking place in your life, or when you get busier, or sometimes you get a flu, just a simple cold or a flu that causes a distraction, and after you have recovered, you find it difficult to get started again. You always come back. Once you have tasted the benefits of real yoga, you'll always come back to it. So life is not perfect. Life is not that you are in the circumstances that you could have when you're living in a monastery. There are people around, there are duties to perform, responsibilities to be taken care of. And that can cause a scattering of your attention, and see it all as a play. And with time you get better and better at in reserving time for yourself. You try to manage how you use your energy, but there always has to be time for yourself. Effort and dedication is in the same line, of course. Nothing is being achieved without effort. Courage, that seems like a little bit odd. Courage, why courage? Because true yoga takes the lid off your jar. It opens your consciousness, and that is a wonderful process. But in that process there are also some less pleasant things happening. And that is your natural tendency to start investigating yourself and your past. And you will come across unpleasant matters. And that requires courage. Courage to deal with them honestly. True knowledge. What is true knowledge? True knowledge is the knowledge that is obtained through contemplation, through experience. You think true knowledge is what comes out of books, education. If I sit here and I read the text from a book, that is not true knowledge. If I sit here and I speak from experience based on inspiration, that is true knowledge. So there is a difference there. You can have degrees without being wise. Have you ever met people or seen them being interviewed on TV, on the news or something? People with titles, with degrees, and you think, how is it possible that they are lacking common sense? That is because knowledge can be just purely theoretical, something that you memorize without any insight, without any contemplation. On the other hand, there are people who show incredible wisdom, deep insight, while barely being able to read and write. And that is the difference between knowledge and true knowledge. True knowledge is something that you feel, that is intuitive. While knowledge is that can be anything from a newspaper to a book to education, etc. To what other people are telling you, not based on their own experience, but just by hearsay. Just repeating what other people have said without investigating, without checking the truthfulness of it. Belief, faith, and confidence. That is basically the last niyama, surrender. Belief, faith, and confidence make it sound like a religion, but yoga is dealing with many issues that are not concrete. In the Bible, they have invented the image of doubting Thomas. You know who the doubting Thomas is? The majority of the people in this world are doubting Thomases. Doubting Thomas is the person who says, I don't see anything, I don't smell anything, I don't hear anything, it doesn't exist. It's happening now with the coronavirus. It's amazing, in Korea, everybody is wearing a mask. I'm not. Sorry. But the numbers are very low as a result of that. Go to Holland, where I come from, or any other European country, or America, and there are many doubting Thomases. This virus is serious. And yet many people don't believe it because you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't smell anything, you don't touch anything, you don't taste anything. What are we talking about here? We're talking about subtle elements. The virus is not visible. It is visible if you know how to look. If you look at the statistics of the number of people infected, people dying, it is visible. But most people are very one or two dimensional and they don't make the link. I don't see, hear, taste, feel, smell anything, so it doesn't exist. I have a very funny anecdote that is actually not so funny at all. But about the doubting Thomas, when I was a teenager, I had a part-time job at the airport in Amsterdam. And our company, on Friday night, received a whole shipping from the southern part of the country from a nuclear power plant. One of the byproducts of the nuclear power plant is isotopes that are being used for X-rays in hospitals. So we would receive a whole shipment of these little boxes with isotopes that we then distributed to the hospitals in the northern provinces of the Netherlands. And one day, one of the guys driving a forklift, which is a small vehicle but very heavy, 4,000 kilo. One of the boxes fell off the pallet and he flattened it with his front wheel, and people immediately scrambled, running away. And he scratched his head and he said, why are you all running away? We have to call the fire brigade. You destroyed, it's dangerous, radiation. And he said, it's flat. So what? I don't smell anything. He literally said, I don't smell it. I don't see anything. Then the fire brigade came with their hazmat suits, totally protected, checking with a Geiger counter, and fortunately it's packed so well that even the forklift couldn't damage it. But this is an example of doubting Thomas. What's inside that package, if it is exposed, it's deadly, can be deadly. But you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't smell anything, so it doesn't exist. That is why we need belief, faith, and confidence. You will be confronted with issues that you scratch your head and say, is this true? Because we talk about subtle things that are not immediately visible or palpable, but will become clearer over time when you increase in terms of consciousness and sensitivity also. Perception, subtle perception. Detachment from people's company, we talked about that already. In the beginning of the handout I mentioned nada. Patanjali somewhere in his sutras says yoga is sukham and stiram. Sukham is easy, stiram is straight. In the second paragraph you see that I described a little bit about that sutra. If you do yoga correctly, which means in silence, with your full attention, and you approach it the way that I taught you from the beginning of this course, each asana becomes a meditation exercise in itself. You close your eyes, and now that you know nada, you hear nada. You let nada be your guide. And you know what happens when you hear nada? You naturally straighten. Without consciously doing the effort, it's like a hot air balloon that makes you straight without effort. That is the result of your energy being here and not there. That is why asana is approached in this very particular way, where you start with the mantra, which is the name of the exercise. You simply repeat the name of the exercise in silence. Because you know the exercise, you have experienced, felt the exercise, simply repeating the name makes a connection inside you that gives you memory of that previous experience with the exercise. It's kind of neuro-linguistic programming that you do here. Then you visualize the pose, and only then you jump into action and you actually perform the pose. Why should we follow this procedure? Because everything is energy, and we live in a world where we do many things in our lives without the energy being there. And that leads to half-baked work, half-baked results. If you do something with your full attention and your full intention, and you put your heart into it, the result is just so much better than when you do it while being busy with other things. What is the real value of this? First of all, of course, your practice of the asanas gets better and better because you are very consciously aware of every little aspect of that exercise. That sounds very superficial, but the next step is it starts to integrate into your daily life. Whatever it is that you do as a professional, in your private life, in relationships, etc., is all becomes influenced by this approach, where you do things very intently, very consciously. As a result, the results of whatever it is that you do becomes better. That is where a specialist comes from. You can perform a job for 30 years and never become a real specialist at it. You just go through the motions. You just keep repeating what you have been trained to do. Remember last week, we made this graph on the board with those 4 overlapping circles. When you put your whole heart into something, whatever it is that you do, you naturally become a specialist at it. That leads to an enormous satisfaction as a result of what you do. And it also eventually leads to the possibility that you can make a living out of it. Okay? So yoga, even the word yoga, from my perception, is very superficial. I don't like to say I'm a yogi or a yogacharya, because it's just a word. Yoga is like that. It's just a system. It's just exercise. It's just a philosophy. But it starts taking on real meaning if you come to the essence of it. And if you come to the essence of me, the title of yogi or yogacharya is totally out of place. You will discover something very different, a whole different dimension. And yoga has only become a vessel, a vehicle. Titles are superficial, empty. People who insist on their titles, they're just occupied by ego. Questions? Okay, let's have a short break.